am Dominus Cinephile.
Welcome to my movie and TV series reviews, where I will provide honest opinions of the latest releases. If the movie or TV series is a hit or a miss, be sure to know I will inform you. But if the movie or series is trash, be also sure to know that I will trash the hell out of the movie. I am Dominus Cinephile.
And the movie on the review table today is the Nollywood film, Everybody Loves Jenifa. Everybody Loves Jenifa is a 2024 Nigerian comedy drama that serves as a high-powered sequel in the legendary Jenifa franchise. Written by funkeakindele, Collins Omo, and Akilabi Ishola, and directed by funkeakindele alongside Tunde Olaoye, the film showcases Nollywood's finest. Leading the pack is funkeakindele herself, joined by Nancy Isime, Stannze, Lateef Adedimeji, Falz, Layi Wasabi, Omowumi Dada, Chimezie Imo, Patience Ozokwo, Toby Makinde, and Ghanaian screen icon Jackie Appiah. The film premiered theatrically across Nigerian cinemas on December 13, 2024, and immediately became a cultural phenomenon. Riding on the unstoppable popularity of the Jenifa brand, it stormed the box office, grossing 500 million naira in just 12 days. By its 19th day of release, it shattered records by hitting the 1 billion naira mark, the fastest Nollywood film to ever reach that milestone, according to FilmOne Entertainment. As of today, Everybody Loves Jenifa has allegedly amassed a staggering 1.88 billion naira at the Nigerian box office, cementing its place as one of the highest grossing Nollywood films of all time and a benchmark for commercial success in the industry. For audiences who missed the cinema run, the film was re-released on Amazon Prime Video on August 29, 2025, giving millions of viewers around the world the chance to stream and experience the blockbuster that redefined Nollywood's box office game. Everybody Loves Jenifa follows the next chapter in the chaotic yet resilient life of Jenifa, now living in a luxurious estate, basking in the success of her thriving business while running a local NGO dedicated to uplifting the poor and empowering her community. But her world is shaken when a rival NGO surfaces, led by Lockstar, a cunning and charismatic fraud who hides his criminal nature behind a facade of respectability. At first, Jenifa tries to extend a hand of collaboration, but Lockstar rejects her with arrogance. Things take a darker turn when Jenifa accidentally witnesses Lockstar brutally abusing his wife, leaving her on the brink of death. Determined not to stay silent, Jenifa steps in to seek justice for the helpless woman. But her courage sets off a dangerous chain of events as Lockstar retaliates and Jenifa suddenly becomes the target of a sinister plot that threatens her very life. Forced to flee, Jenifa escapes to Ghana hoping for refuge, but instead finds herself caught in an even deadlier trap, a violent drug cartel war where loyalty, betrayal, and survival collide. With her closest friends by her side, Jenifa must once again rely on her wit, humor, and unyielding spirit to outsmart the chaos. At the same time, she wrestles with the complicated emotions of her long-standing love interest, played by Falz, whose presence in her life brings both comfort and turmoil. We are finally circling back to this movie, something I couldn't review when it premiered in December 2024. Honestly, I wasn't even opportune to watch it in cinemas. and the reason is simple. The ticket prices were outrageously steep for a film I already suspected wouldn't live up to the hype. Imagine paying between 8,000 naira and 10,000 naira just to sit through a movie that might end up being a glorified disappointment. No way! Add to that the petty antics of certain Nollywood power players who wouldn't hesitate to report my channel to YouTube if I so much as sneezed wrong in their direction, and you'll understand why I stayed away. In this YouTube universe, the fear of a strike is truly the beginning of wisdom. But now, thanks to Amazon Prime Video, the movie has finally landed on streaming. Those of us who skipped the overpriced cinema run in 2024 finally have the chance to sit down, watch, and give it a proper review without burning a hole in our pockets.
Before we dive in, let me make one thing clear. I'm not about to get lost in the supposed box office numbers being paraded around for this film. Just like I said in my review of A Tribe Called Judah, those figures don't reflect the reality of the Nigerian film industry. They are inflated, manipulated, and designed to sell an illusion rather than reveal the truth. If you haven't seen that breakdown, check out my review of A Tribe Called Judah here. It will give you the context you need. The first thing this movie throws in your face isn't comedy, plot, or even a coherent story. It's celebrity cameos on steroids. Hilda Baci? Check. Vicky James? Check. Lagbaja? Check. D'banj? Of course. It's like the producers raided Instagram, TikTok, and the Lagos socialite directory just to cram as many recognizable names as possible into 2 hours of screen time. But here's the real problem. None of these celebrities do anything. Not one. They stroll in, smile for the camera, and exit stage left as if they are late for another endorsement deal. No character development, no meaningful dialogue, no reason to even be there other than to bait fans into buying a ticket. It's the cinematic equivalent of clickbait. Loud, flashy, and ultimately empty. Instead of giving us a comedy with bites, the film settles for being a glorified red carpet event masquerading as a movie. And while the cast list might look impressive on a poster, on screen, it's nothing more than expensive wallpaper, fancy, distracting, and completely useless to the story. If this was supposed to be a comedy, then the biggest joke is on the audience. This movie is essentially divided into 2 halves, Nigeria and Ghana. Like someone tore a script in the middle and stitched it back together with duct tape. The Nigerian half is supposed to ground the story, while the Ghanaian half drags Jenifa into some cartel-fueled chaos. On paper, that could have worked. On screen, the 2 plot arcs have zero chemistry, zero flow, and zero connection to the supposed essence of the film. It's like watching 2 completely different movies shoved into one, and neither of them knows what it's doing. Let's start with Lagos. The film pretends to take on the heavy issue of domestic violence, with Jenifa causing parts with Lobster and his abusive antics. Sounds noble, right? Wrong. Instead of being a bold emotional commentary, the narrative is handled with all the depth of an Instagram skit. Every scene feels rushed, shallow, and strung together like clips meant to go viral on TikTok rather than tell a cohesive story.
What should have been a powerful storyline about abuse and justice falls into cheap comedy setups that don't land, forcing the audience to laugh at what should actually sting. And then comes Ghana. Suddenly, we are in a whole different movie. Drug cartels, shootouts, betrayals, and chaos. At this point, you are left wondering, what exactly is this film trying to be? A social drama about domestic violence? A slapstick comedy? A crime thriller? Or maybe a rom-com with shege locking in the background? The movie keeps hopping from theme to theme like a confused TikTok creator chasing trends, never committing to one storyline long enough to matter. In the end, the film's biggest crime isn't the bad editing, the wasted cameos, or even the shallow writing. It's the identity crisis. Everybody Loves Jenifa doesn't know if it wants to make you laugh, cry, or take a stand. So it tries to do all three and ends up doing none. What we get is a chaotic patchwork that mistakes noise for substance and confusion for creativity. Now, let's talk about the so-called script. And I use that word very loosely because, let's be honest, this movie doesn't actually have one. It's a known fact, allegedly, that funkeakindele doesn't really write scripts for her films. Instead, what we get are rough outlines and the rest is left to improvisation. In simple terms, this movie is basically a freestyle session. Actors wander onto the screen, blot out whatever pops into their heads, and we are expected to believe it's dialogue. This isn't writing, it's chaos with the camera rolling. The disaster reaches its peak with Lobster, the so-called villain of the Nigerian segment. In one of his rants at his wife, trying to justify his abuse while boasting about the luxuries he provides, he proudly utters this gem: "From America to the United States." Yes, you read that correctly. The man literally said from America to the United States, as though they are two different countries. And the movie just kept rolling like that made any sense. Do you know how insane that sounds? That's like someone saying, "I've traveled from Kano to Nigeria." Make it make sense. How do you confuse one country with itself? How do you, as a writer or director, not catch such an embarrassing blunder? The fact that the actor wasn't stopped and asked to retake that line tells us everything we need to know. This film had no script, no attention to detail, and no respect for the audience's intelligence. It's beyond sloppy, it's insulting, and it cements the truth. Everybody Loves Jenifa isn't a movie crafted with care. It's an improvised mess, stitched together and passed off as cinema. Let's get into the comedy, or rather, the tragic attempt at it. This movie spends 2 hours trying to be funny and fails miserably. Most of the jokes fall flat, and when they do land, it feels accidental, like the audience is laughing at the film, not with it. Instead of clever writing, sharp dialogue, or situational humor, the movie leans entirely on Jennifer's tired bag of tricks, her exaggerated mannerisms, and her comically broken English.
That shtick might have worked a decade ago, when Jennifer's Diary was fresh. But by now, it's stale, predictable, and painfully unfunny. Every gag feels recycled. Every punchline feels forced. And instead of innovation, we get repetition. It's like the filmmakers assumed the audience would still laugh just because Jennifer mispronounces words or acts local. But when the entire comedy engine is running on fumes from one old gimmick, the result isn't humor, it's boredom. And here's the kicker. The comedy doesn't even fit into any recognizable comedy category. It's not slapstick, satire, body comedy, romantic comedy, dark comedy, spoof, shook ball, gross out, and so on. This film doesn't commit to any of them. It's not clever enough to be satire, not physical enough to be slapstick, not outrageous enough to be gross out, and not structured enough to be situational. Instead, it floats in a confusing no man's land of half-baked skits stitched together, pretending to be a movie. At the end of the day, the comedy in Everybody Loves Jenifa isn't comedy, it's cringe. The film mistakes loudness for laughter and broken English for brilliance, and the result is 2 hours of second-hand embarrassment. Now let's drag the directing and editing, because honestly, this is where the movie collapses completely. Watching Everybody Loves Jenifa feels less like a cinematic experience and more like scrolling through a badly edited YouTube playlist. Scenes don't flow into one another. They just jump around, stitched together with the grace of a primary school PowerPoint presentation. There's no pacing, no rhythm, no cinematic vision, just chaos disguised as creativity. The directing is so weak, it feels like no one was actually in charge. Instead of guiding the story, shaping performances, or setting a consistent tone, the directors simply let the camera roll while everyone improvised. That's why you get scenes that drag too long, others that end abruptly, and transitions that feel like you are being yanked from one skit to another with no warning. It's not storytelling, it's random content stitched together and dumped on screen.
And the editing? A total disaster. Cuts are jarring, comedic timing is non-existent, and dramatic beats are suffocated before they even breathe. Important moments, like the supposed domestic violence storyline, are undercut by poor editing choices that kill any emotional weight. Instead of immersing you, the editing keeps pulling you out, constantly reminding you that you are watching a poorly assembled product. Here's the sad truth. This movie looks and feels like it was directed and edited for Instagram Reels, not the big screen. It's glossy on the surface, but hollow underneath. For a film that made billions at the Nigerian box office, it's shocking how little attention was paid to the fundamentals of filmmaking. The direction is lazy, the editing is amateurish, and the end result is a glorified skit compilation pretending to be a blockbuster. Let's break down the actors' performances, starting with Funkeakindele as Jenifa. And honestly, there's nothing new here. From the very first scene, you can already predict what a character will bring. Exaggerated mannerisms, broken English, and forced attempts at comedy. That formula might have worked years ago, but here it feels tired, repetitive, and downright uninspired. Her performance comes off less like natural comedy and more like a constant struggle to be funny. You can almost see her pushing too hard to deliver laughs, but the jokes don't land, leaving the audience watching a character that feels stuck in the past. Instead of refreshing Jenifa or giving her any depth, Funke falls back on old gimmicks that no longer have the same spark. The only scenes where she showed any semblance of purpose were the ones involving the character played by Falz, her love interest. Those interactions, while still underdeveloped, at least gave her character something to hold on to beyond slapstick antics. But outside of that, Jenifa was nothing more than recycled humor stitched into an already weak storyline. Funkeakindele delivered a below-average performance, and honestly, I wasn't expecting much in terms of performance from her. This was disappointing. More of the same old Jenifa routine, stretched thin and struggling to stay relevant. The remaining cast weren't funny enough, nor was their performance in a comedy movie anything worth writing home about. Most of them just showed up, delivered flat lines, and disappeared without leaving any impression.
It felt like they were dragged onto set simply to fill space, not to actually contribute to the story. The only person who made any real sense to me was skit maker Layi Wasabi, who played Shege's friend. To my surprise, he brought some layered presence into the film. He was genuinely funny, and his dialogue carried that raw Nigerian Yoruba comedic flavor that felt natural and unforced. Even though he was basically reenacting his popular skit persona, it worked here. It gave the movie a moment of authenticity in the middle of all the mess. Honestly, I didn't expect much from him as an actor after seeing his performances in other films, but he proved me wrong this time. Beyond Layi, the rest of the cast were just fillers with no real essence or life in the movie. They existed simply to appear on screen and vanish without consequence. Take Falz, for instance. His entire presence was nothing more than what we already see on his Instagram posts every day. No growth, no range, no real acting. Just recycled content pretending to be performance. In summary, beyond the allegedly inflated Nigerian box office numbers that claim this movie raked in billions, the hype does not in any way reflect the reality of what's on screen. Numbers can be cooked up, overhyped, and paraded around, but they can't hide the fact that Everybody Loves Jenifa is a no-script disaster. From the weak recycled performances to the lazy directing, from the hollow skit-like scenes stitched together to the incoherent storyline that doesn't know what it wants to be, the movie collapses under the weight of its own emptiness. The so-called comedy never found its footing. The heavy things like domestic violence were handled with the depth of a TikTok skit, and the bloated cast added nothing of substance. What we were left with was a glorified cameo fest, sloppy editing, and a script that doesn't exist. The film is proof that star power and box office hype cannot cover up the lack of craft, vision, or storytelling. Everybody Loves Jenifa feels less like a movie and more like a franchise, forcing everyone to love Jenifa. Maybe it worked for those dazzled by the cinema lights and billboards, but for me and for anyone watching with a brain, there's no loving this messy, shallow, directionless entry in the Jenifa saga. It's a flop in everything that makes a movie, and those Nigerian box office numbers, they are not even remotely real. And now for my rating. Everybody Loves Jenifa scores a well-deserved 2 out of 10. I'm definitely trashing this. Thank you for watching. Please remember to like, comment, and share this video. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and click on the bell icon for notifications. Also, be sure to follow me on TikTok, WhatsApp channel, and Instagram at Domino's Cinefa for more movie and TV series reviews. Domino's Cinefa, signing out.